Hi, this is David Tighe from Bauer Media in Northern Ireland, and welcome to another edition of Business Bites. Each week, we catch up with a business leader and we get some insight and expert analysis on their part of the business world. This week, I'm really pleased to be joined by Steve Thornton, who's head of hockey and commercial at the Odyssey Trust. Steve, welcome to Business Bites.
Thank you, David, for having me.
Well, listen, it's great to see you. Let's get straight into it. We've got so much to discuss this week. Steve, first of all, for the uninitiated, just explain a little bit about what the Odyssey Trust is and some of the brands that would be associated with it.
Absolutely, yeah. No, the trust is a charitable trust that was established to manage, safeguard, and develop the Odyssey project for the people of Northern Ireland to the benefit of the people. So what that is essentially is we give experiences in science through W5 and education, entertainment in the arena. Lots of leading concerts come in, and of course the Belfast Giants ice hockey team as well. So it's a project that's just gone 20 years old now, and it's one of the leading destinations in Northern Ireland in terms of foot traffic and entertainment.
Yep, and I think we're all very familiar with those brands. So obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that a lot of those brands are indoors, and indoors has particularly faced challenges in the last 18 months or so. So tell us about how you've managed to deal with all of that.
Yeah, it was an incredible and unprecedented 18 months. It was not a fantastic time to be in the business of mass gatherings, unfortunately, and it was so hard to plan for it. You kind of needed a crystal ball. Like we had, early days, you just didn't know how long it was going to last, when the vaccine was going to come, if you were able to get back to events. What we did know is that the business that we were going to come back to was completely different than it was before we left it. So, behind the scenes, we've been doing what we can to prep for this new world, through digital ticketing, and we've changed the model in W5. We've done some investment into the site. We're obviously very excited to be having some light at the end of the tunnel with the news that we had earlier this week that we can get back to events without the social distancing, and the Giants start this Friday. So we've built an ice hockey team in the last few months as well that will hopefully be competing for titles again this year. So the time was a bit of a blur, and there were obviously ups and downs throughout it, but we're excited to be where we are right now.
Yeah, I was privileged enough to take a little walk around the W5 area with you a few months back, and some really exciting changes and developments going on there in the background. I'm sure they've moved on since we saw it. But one of the things that struck me was the need for kind of corporate sponsorship and partnerships to make some of these areas really fly for you. So how have you got on there?
Well, that was one of the unknowns, really. Like when we were budgeting for this year, like you kind of had to throw a dart as to where you were going to land on it. We had a lot of conversations in the background and strategically focused on companies that had been doing well during the pandemic, and I guess we were in a decent position with that. We had a Welcome Trust grant and some investment that we had pre-planned to redevelop W5, and we created some zones in there that were something that we could get sponsored. So a lot of conversations happened behind the scenes on that. But then, in the build up to bringing the Giants back and to opening events, like we just were in a holding pattern with, the annual suites and some of the high value customers that we would have had, and sponsors and partners that you just couldn't answer any questions. It was difficult to have the conversation because the questions that came at you, you couldn't really answer. But what we did do from early days is that we made the decision that any of the partners that we had, we were going to leave them in a position where they weren't any worse off. So like for the annual suite holders, that had lost time on their contract, we're bringing them back in, and we're having those conversations individually now because we are getting to the point where we can open. And with the world opening back up again, I think people will ultimately want to be doing things. They're not going to procrastinate possibly as much as they would have in the past. And I think that you can get people to the opening of an envelope these days. I think just in general, people want to do things. So we're a place that brings people together. We've got high quality entertainment, and we're excited about the next couple of years of what our business holds.
Obviously, with the last 18 months and your background in sport, there must have been some correlation between sports psychology and business psychology. Can you share some kind of learns that you've got over the last period in that respect?
Well, I suppose, every time you enter a sporting event, you're kind of going into the unknown. You try to prep and deal with what you can control, and then you try to get the outcome you want by following the process. And during that process, you do what you can to try not to let the highs get too high and the lows get too low. And over the last 18 months, the lows could have been really low, in this business, because it got to a point where they're just you couldn't see the end. You didn't know if you were going to be able to open or not. So I think you build up a lot of resilience, being involved in sports, because after every weekend, it's like you're having a shareholder meeting on the Monday. It's not quarterly or annual reports. You're dealing with things, very quickly. You're having to make decisions very quickly, and that's what the pandemic was. We business planned, and then 2 weeks later we'd tear up the business plan, and then you'd start over again, and then you start over again, and just trying to stay positive through it is something that I think sports can add to that kind of mindset, and I suppose that's probably the main thing for us.
Yeah, obviously, then we come to the fact that the executive have removed a lot of the restrictions for indoor events, and we look to the future. What does the future look like? What's the future for the venues that you've got? Can you let us into some plans that you've got in perhaps 2022?
Well, we're extremely excited that, because the site has had close to 30 million pounds worth of investment. So, like I said, at the beginning, it's a different business that we're coming back to. W5 has been completely remodeled from top to bottom. So it's essentially a new science center. And the challenge for us for W5 is changing the model from that 9 to 5 to the whole 9 to 9. So that 5 to 9 time slot, what are we going to do? How are we going to get people in and out? How are they going to feel safe in there? And we want to make sure that we're, again, creating great experiences, focusing on science and education, and as well corporate hospitality. It's a kind of hidden secret in W5. There's some great locations for conferences, events, summits, and business meetings. The pavilion itself has gone through pushing a 20 million pound redevelopment with a new identity, focusing on that family friendly market, which suits us really, really well. So we're going to have a lot of people just coming to the pavilion and finding us, and coming into the B5, and stumbling onto Giants games. So we just haven't had that in the last few years of the pavilion. And the arena itself as well. Like the arena itself is one of the top 50 arenas and venues in the world. We have upwards of 140 events a year, the Giants being the anchor tenants with 30 to 40 games per year. We're looking at putting a little bit of investment into there to enhance the experience as well. So there'll be small changes that people will see with their customer journey, where it's digital ticketing. We're trying to go cashless, and certain things on game night, trying to enhance just customer experiences. Those would be the major changes, but we are excited about the next couple of years of the events we have coming up as well.
It all sounds very, very exciting, and certainly a different place to where we were this time last year. I suppose I've got to ask you, the Giants, they're back. How important is that moment going to be when they get back on the ice, and when there's fans and there's noise? What's that going to feel like for the guys involved with the team?
Like, the guys behind the scenes are super excited, because obviously they love the sport, but we've had a lot of season ticket holders and fans that have been coming for 20 years. And the people sitting next to them in the stadium have been like their extended family. So they're coming to see the people again and meet the players, and just even help with the mental health issues that are out there right now. We feel that we can play our part, and we have played our part in the pandemic with the vaccination center and the testing center outside. So the Giants, getting them back on Friday night is icing on the cake, and hopefully we'll be in a position to compete for trophies this year.
Steve, it's a great story. We wish you and all the team the very best into the future, and we hope the Giants pull off a big win on Friday night. Thanks for being our guest.
Thanks for having me, David.